I think we got to go ahead to get started. This is, I will call the meeting of Planning and Zoning Commission. This is a study session for December 2nd, 2020. Just a reminder, due to Governor Lujan Grisham's order limiting the number of attendees at gatherings, the planning and zoning session will not be open to the general public, but the public is invited to view the study session on Suddenlink Channel 10 or the cityofclovis.org or the Facebook page for the City of Clovis. If you have any questions, you can call into 575-763-9200, and the questions will then be shared with us whenever we open up for questions at that time. To get the meeting started, we need to declare a quorum, so can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you. Chairman Smith?
Present.
Vice Chair Moore?
Present.
Commissioner Morrison? Here. Commissioner Saul?
Here.
Okay, Commissioner Garza? Okay, Commissioner Travis Klein? Commissioner Steve North?
Here.
Did I not see Commissioner Klein there?
Mr. Chairman, just to remind everybody, if you're on the phone and you're on mute, you may have to press *6 to unmute yourself.
Travis Klein's here.
Okay, so okay, thank you. Also, except for Commissioner.
Okay, we do have a quorum. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Morris, our city attorney, to kind of go over what we've done with this sign code. So, Mr. Morris, can you take it away, sir?
Sure. So, back in June of 2019, the city, as most of you know, adopted the Unified Development Ordinance, which was a comprehensive development and construction plan within the city of Clovis, which was supposed to include a sign code with it. At the time it was adopted, I think it came to my predecessor, Mr. Richards' attention that there was a change in law regarding content restrictions on signs that affected virtually every city's sign codes. And so they decided to hold off. They reserved Section 17, Article 45, which is now going to be the sign code, until we could get some clarification and do some research on how to go forward with it. When I took over in July of 19, I think I asked Justin, let's just wait and see what other cities take the lead and how they adopt and draft a sign code and how they attack the issue. But after about 6 months, maybe even closer to a year, it became clear that nobody was going to do that. And I think to this day, we will be, assuming this gets adopted in the next 2 or 3 months, the first city in the state to adopt a content-neutral, legally sufficient sign code. So I think that's sort of how we got where we are. Because we weren't able to pull from other jurisdictions because nobody had really tackled it before, we relied a lot on the IMLA, which is the International Municipal Lawyers Association. They had already drafted and redrafted a content-neutral model sign code, is what they titled it, for its members' use. And so we got a copy of that. And we took that, and then we took, because our code was already in need of updating big time, we took pieces and portions from other similarly situated and similarly sized cities' codes and some of the stuff on our own, and spent a lot of time on it and came up with what we have now. And just for clarification, because some of it at first glance may seem a little bit strange, so I just want to give a brief background of the law and why some of it's worded the way it is. There's all throughout history, there's been dozens of Supreme Court cases that have held that a city can regulate signs, that they have discretion to regulate the number of signs, the size of signs, the location of signs, etc. In 2015, a case called Reed v. Gilbert was decided. Mr. Reed was the pastor of a small church in Gilbert, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix. Gilbert, about 10 years before that, had enacted a sign code that had certain size requirements for what they called ideological signs. And so Mr. Reed, on behalf of his church, sued Gilbert and said, that's content restrictive, that violates my First Amendment right to free speech. The city's argument was, we're not discriminating between ideologies. We don't care if it's a sign promoting a synagogue or a Christian sign or what. But the Supreme Court agreed with Mr. Reed and said any restriction based on the type of sign is unlawful. And there's some complicated exceptions to that, but that's the general rule. And then I think in 2018 or maybe early 2019, the city of Albuquerque was sued based on this Reed v. Gilbert case, and that's when it came to Dave's attention, Mr. Richards, and I think that's when it was put on the radar of all the cities and counties in New Mexico. And so that's sort of how we got where we are now. I don't mind going through, I'm assuming most people have a copy of the sign code, and sort of discussing the highlights from the sections, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, and then maybe open it up for some questions. So to begin, the sign code is in Chapter 17, Article 45 of the UDO is where we're going to insert it. And so when I'm going through it, I'll just refer to the sections because they're all 1745, so the section numbers will be on the right. So the first section is .010, which is the purpose. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's standard. It has a severability clause. The second section, the general provision section, again, probably doesn't need much explanation. I think it just explains what all sign codes explain, which is trying to strike a balance between understanding the need and the purpose of signs and allowing and promoting signs for economic growth while balancing the aesthetic impact that they have and other implications as well. The definitional section, there's only one definition that I kind of wanted to direct your attention towards because I think we'll discuss it later, and that would be on page 5, substantially repaired. Again, I'll get into that later, but that's one definition that I think we struggled with and may have some comment and criticism or critique of. The next section is prohibited signs. Again, I think it's basically self-explanatory. Signs that are not allowed specifically within the sign code are generally prohibited. And the same with the following section, 050, authorized signs. It makes clear that most government signs are authorized. Signs inside private property that aren't viewable from the right-of-way or the street are not regulated whatsoever. The next section, .60, just makes it clear that we can enforce the sign code against a tenant or a landlord, depending on the circumstances. The next section, .70, discusses permits. I think the biggest thing that you can take from that is almost all signs are going to require a permit except for temporary signs in residential districts. Other than that, just about every sign is going to require a permit from the city. Moving on to residential districts. So it starts with residential development signs. Not too much there. And then it goes on to temporary signs. And temporary signs is something that we spent a lot of time looking at other cities and our own needs and coming up with what we did for temporary signs. So essentially you get 3 freebies, 3 temporary signs in a residential district that you can put up in a property. And we envisioned that as being anything from a sign promoting your church or a sign of a construction company that did your roof or a Wildcat football sign for your child or whatever it is. You get 3 of those. You also get under D3 the ability to put up what were previously called political signs, and now we're just calling them signs located on private property prior to an election. And some of these kind of seem to be splitting hairs, but for each one of these examples that the model code from the Municipal Lawyers Association gave, they gave great background, and they had a team of lawyers working on it as to why they felt this would comply with the new law. So, to me, in my opinion, some of it seems like it's sort of a backdoor way of still regulating content, but this is what they've come up with. And so, and this is what other cities are beginning to use. So instead of calling them political signs, basically it allows quote unquote temporary signs on an owner's property 30 days before an election and then more than 10 days following an election. I think the intent is, and we may need to make this more clear, that the word election would be election day. Since you can't vote after election day, I don't know that there would be a need to keep them up after election day, even though the results may not be certified as we're seeing now for some time. Also, we, under Section D4, it talks about what we previously called real estate signs, and now they word it in a different way that's basically allowing temporary signs on your property if it's offered for sale. And so that discusses the size and requirements of real estate signs. Under D5, those are essentially open house signs that you can put up when your house is for sale. And then D6 would be what I would call holiday or Christmas signs, but we just called them signs, temporary signs between December 1st and January 10th. So it allows you to put up lights, decorations, Christmas signs, etc. Regarding flags in residential districts, I guess the highlight is you can have 2 flagpoles with a total of 4 flags maximum. Moving on to commercial and industrial. So there's, I think, 2 types of signs in commercial and industrial that are the big part of the section, and those are attached signs, signs that are attached to the wall or painted on the wall, and freestanding signs. I won't go through the size requirements. You all have the tables in front of you, but basically you can have 1 attached sign for each wall in commercial and CBD districts, and 1 freestanding sign for each lot, unless you have more than 600 feet of street frontage. Then you can have up to 2 freestanding signs. The big difference is on temporary signs. We allowed temporary signs in the same way that we did in residential districts: real estate signs, political signs, open house signs, etc. And later in the section, it discusses special commercial events like grand openings and going out of business signs and displays, etc. But the thing that we did not allow is just the 3 gimmies, the 3 random temporary signs that can be anything that you want. And the reason is, I think there was, from the city's standpoint, an effort to sort of clean up some clutter and advertising signs in front of some businesses and gas stations, etc. And so that's the way it's drafted now. Regarding flags in subsection E, you can have up to 3 flagpoles and up to 6 flags. The industrial section is the next section that follows in section 100. It's pretty similar to the commercial general and CBD sections. And one thing to note is the tables in the commercial general and CBD sections are used in the industrial section as well. So for size and height requirements, you have to refer back to the tables in section 90 in the CBD and CG sections. So there are increased size and height allowances in industrial districts, but other than that, the restrictions on the number of signs are the same. 1 attached sign for each wall, 1 freestanding sign unless you have over 600 square feet. Same temporary sign provisions and same flag provisions as commercial general and central business district. 110 addresses business centers, also known as strip malls, and basically allows an attached sign for each wall of business, and also allows those businesses that share space to combine their street frontage in terms of calculating their size for a freestanding sign if they choose to do that. The PUD, Section 120, I think is pretty self-explanatory, requires city approval for any signs put up in a planned unit development zone. 130 is the next section, and that will be your off-premises advertising signs, also known as billboards. Again, just like the size and height requirements we came up with for attached signs and freestanding signs, we tried to take what we could from other cities and that are similarly sized and situated and put together something that's in the middle of what other people are doing. And so that's where we came up with our requirement of 242 square feet, 800 feet spacing between the signs, and 35 feet in height. And again, the attachment with the sign code reference tables will have all that for your reference as well. Commercial promotional displays in Section 140, I mentioned those earlier, but it allows a business to put up displays, streamers, balloons, signs, etc. You need to get a permit from the city, but if you're having some sort of commercial event, or if you're having a going out of business, or if you're having a grand opening. Athletic field signs in Section 150, again, it allows the placement of signs, as we already have within the city, inside athletic fields, typically inside the fence of a soccer, baseball, or football field, so long as they don't protrude above the fence, and each sign is only 32 square feet. Nonconformity and modification. This section, I think, contains some language that needs to be changed, likely, but we left it as is for your comment. But basically what this section says is if you have a non-conforming sign other than a billboard, it has to be removed within 1 year. Billboards are grandfathered in. I think, though, that that needs to probably include freestanding signs because there are a lot of expensive and large freestanding signs all over Clovis that probably should be grandfathered in. But again, we'll leave that to your comment. And then in getting down to subsection D, this is language and a provision that's included in every single sign code, and I've probably read upwards of 50 of them. And that is basically if you have a non-conforming sign that's grandfathered in, but you need to take it down to repair it, and it's quote-unquote substantially repaired, then it needs to be brought back into conformity with the current sign code before you can replace it. And that's where the definition of substantially repaired, I think, can get a little bit tricky in terms of what that means. And I think different cities are all over the place. So we came up with the best definition that we could, but I think I am definitely open to comment regarding that section. And then lastly is the enforcement and abatement section. This mirrors almost identically word for word what's currently in our UDO. And from a legal perspective, I think it just makes it easier and cleaner to have the same enforcement provisions for your sign code as you do for your development code, your public nuisance code, everything else. And so there is one distinction between this provision and the UDO, and that is that under the proposed enforcement section here, there's a minimum fine for a second and third violations for the same offense. So, for example, if you have a non-conforming sign, you're given a warning, then you're given a citation. For your second and third offense under another violation of the UDO, for example, if you weren't screening properly, or you had a vehicle in the road or whatever, there's no minimum fine, even if you keep making the same violation over and over. Here, we established a minimum fine for the same violation, second offense. Other than that, it's identical to what we have contained in the UDO. So, anyway, that's, I didn't know how in-depth you want me to go, but that's kind of a brief overview, Chairman, and I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, I think that was good. Thank you, sir, for that. The first comment I want to make is I want to thank the city and everybody that had a hand in this, of getting this done over the last, year and a half. There's a lot of work that's been gone into the UDO and updating everything, as well as the sign code. and all of the time and effort spent on getting this updated and where we need to be as a city. It was great of Lewis to do that work and to bring us forward and to be the leader in the state that we are, especially with something like this. So I'm always very proud of that, and I want to thank everybody that has put their hand in this and done the work. It makes us really look good, and especially whenever we've had our study sessions, it's made it really easy and clean, and it all makes sense kind of to us as we've gone through this process. I want to kind of set the stage of what we're going to do now. I will go to, unless there's any other comment from Mr. Howalt or anybody like that, I will go to questions from the commission. So, Mr. Howalt, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, I would just echo what Jared said to start off with is, as we've been going through this process, trying to find a balance between the regulation side and still allowing the businesses and being able to promote their businesses in an equitable manner for themselves. So, like Jared said, we started off over a year and a half ago, was looking at Las Cruces' sign code as a template for us and trying to adapt to us, and then learning about the various lawsuits, obviously, that have occurred over the years, and trying to find that guidance that would allow us to develop something for our community, to keep us in compliance with the Supreme Court ruling, ultimately. Obviously, we don't want to have a code that is not in compliance with federal guidance. So that's kind of what the backbone of what we are trying to do. And the reality of it is when you start digging into signs and trying to think about every type of sign that is potentially out there is challenging. And so you think about, especially when you're trying to keep it content neutral and not say, well, what about a real estate sign? Say, well, we can't call it a real estate sign. And then you start thinking about, well, the handyman sign. And, well, we can't call it a handyman sign. And so it really has been an effort put in on staff's behalf, and I appreciate our building safety department. I appreciate Jared for the research that they have done and put into this, and the many and numerous meetings and hours that we've spent trying to put this together. But by no means are we going to say this is perfect. We know that. That's why we would push it out to the various entities that this will impact, and looking for that feedback, because we want what is best for our community, and what's great for Clovis may not be great for another community, and what's great for another community might not be great for Clovis. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that addition. All right, so let's open it up for questions from the Planning and Zoning Commissioners. I will start with Vice Chair Moore.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate that. I have one thing that I observed that I want to bring to the city's attention is on page 9. It's a typo, I guess, one way or the other. Page 9, top of the page, number 3. It says 102, but the number in parentheses is 112 square feet. Page 9, number 3. So that needs to be clarified. Either it's 102 or 112. I do wonder, because the work that I do, the first thing that came to my mind were National Electric Code clearances. Is that something, particularly with freestanding or billboard signs, that we need to address in here? That there should be language along the lines of it is necessary to adhere to the National Electric Code clearances on signage. What do you think?
Yeah, sorry. I'll have to turn that over to the city to see how we play that in or not.
And Commissioner, I I'm looking right now. There is somewhere in here where it requires us to comply with all applicable state and federal regulations. But I have to take a minute to find that.
Hey, Jared, this is Brandon. If I may, can I have a minute?
You may.
Okay, so the IBC and the electric code, it's basically 14 foot to the bottom of signs that are accessible by traffic. And Tom, that's just like any kind of service overhead that comes to a building.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Moore, do you have any other questions or comments?
This is one of a more personal nature, but it's something we've done recently. So the last time we did it here at Farmers Electric, we had a temporary flag pole, if you will. We used one of our bucket trucks. And it was on election day, because our site was used as a polling place. And so we had one of our larger bucket trucks. I know we exceeded 25 or 50 feet, and our flag measures 8 by 12 or 96 square feet. So that exceeded the commercial size of a flag. Would we be in violation of the code if it was very temporary, one day? We've done it about 4 days a year. Patriotic holidays, on 9/11, those kind of days.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Moore, flags was one of those interesting subjects that we kicked around internally, because the size and nature of flags can vary substantially, and so from a regulation standpoint, regulating the American flag versus regulating my favorite football team flag, since trying to stay content neutral, we're just regulating flags, and we had quite the discussion on, well, what's the appropriate size flag? And so when you start trying to land on some of these decisions, we just kind of took some of the guidance that was provided to us, went with it, and wanted to present it to the group, and that's why we're here today, to try to acquire some of that feedback. But I think Mr. Morris may agree that, I think it would be in violation of the code technically.
I would, if this is Jared Morris speaking, it would be in violation because the code restricts them to 50 feet in height, but no higher than the nearest principal building's roof. One possible solution would be, I think we could allow a greater restriction just on the 4th of July or just on Independence Day, if that's the direction that you guys wanted to go. But I would, Mr. Howell's point was very good. If we're going to allow a 100-foot flag freely, then it's going to be able to be any kind of flag. Anyone's going to be able to fly a flag 100 feet in the air, whatever size that we allow. And so one way to address it would be maybe relax the restrictions on certain days, just off the top of my head, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And one thing is, we've kind of gone through this, that, we're just kind of having discussion about stuff like that is, I trust that the electric co-op is going to be able to fly a flag and have the proper tools to do that. When you start talking about certain signs and things like this, then we become a hazard. Even so, we start saying, yeah, we can do this and we can do that and we can let this restriction go and that kind of thing. And then we, have some person that just puts up a flag and gets a little windy and then it blows over, then we've allowed that to happen. So just as we're having conversation, it's always good to keep safety in mind and keep those things at the forefront of our thought if we're going to start talking about how we, let and allow certain things to happen. So it's just a comment on my side moving forward. So I'll go with Chairman Morrison. Do you have any questions or comments?
were addressed initially that I had jotted down. I was curious why there was a differentiation between a quarter of a acre lot and smaller regarding residential temporary signs. If Mr. Morse, you might know the reasoning behind that. And then on other residential temporary signs, there was also a differentiation between licensed real estate agents and like for sale by owner. But under the for sale by owner, it had a stipulation that it must be in a widely circulated newspaper, which I don't feel like that really is with the times, I guess. I think everything else was addressed previously. Yeah.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
So the 0.25 acres of land was just something that we had came up with, again, kind of meeting in the middle and looking at what other municipalities are doing and also reviewing the model sign code. I think, the intent is obviously the larger the parcel of land, the more of those types of signs that you should be allowed. So certainly if there's a request or reason to increase that based on the average lot size in Clovis, I think that would make sense to me. And regarding, I'm still trying to flip through to see the real estate sign section that you brought up, so just give me 1 second.
Page 9, 4B.
And so did you want something added in there, Commissioner Morrison, about something other than the general newspaper? Is that what you're saying?
That's mostly what I'm saying. It's just not, most people do everything online now. I'm not trying to take anything away from our local newspaper, but it's...
Mr. Chairman, you could stop the sentence after advertising. Through advertising, period.
Yes. I think that we do that and just scratch the rest of that. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is Gayla Brumfield, and since we're talking about one of the reasons that I'm on the meeting, can I go ahead and address a couple of things, please?
Yeah, so we're going to get through the commissioners, and then we'll come back, and then we'll open it up for questions for...
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so Commissioner Morrison, are we good with?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Next we'll do Commissioner Stoll.
Thank you, Chairman. I did have some questions about you already talked about the real estate, so I won't get onto that. You referred to section 1745-080 under D6 as Christmas signs, was it? From December 1st to January 10th, giving people a little more leeway for celebration of Christmas.
It's not defined as Christmas. We just, once again, we can't say a Christmas sign. So we defined it per the period. Whatever celebration is the celebration between December 1st to January 10th. There's the allowing for the lights and decorations and what other temporary signs that you so choose.
So I'm also thinking about, Halloween, Thanksgiving, other days or other holidays that fall outside that time period. Do those fall under a different type of exemption? Or would those be considered?
Yeah, not currently. And what Jared, if I remember correctly, this came out of the model sign ordinance as well.
The December, I don't have the date in front of me, but But that language came directly from the model sign code, and they had about 2 paragraphs explaining why they thought that was acceptable in light of the Supreme Court's ruling. And if I could address Commissioner Morrison, yeah, I think that's a poorly worded section on the I think that 4B on page 9 needs to be completely reworded and just make it clear if it's offered for sale by an owner of the property, then you can have the same type of sign as if it was a listing agent.
Okay, I agree with that.
All right, and I have, so I know that the Reed case did shake a lot of things. As a planner myself and dealing with the the American Planning Association, I've used the International Signing Association as well as the Sign Research Foundation guidance. They have some information here that seems pretty good. They had a resource that was given out in response to Reed. And they have certain regulations here, because I know you had one where you have signage that's against the building, but they have certain things here that signage that I don't think was considered within this code, and I don't know how they would conform or where they would fit into, such as advertising murals or people signs, for instance, or even balloon signs.
So again, I would have to thumb through it. There are, I believe, original art displays are discussed. So I'll have to look at it just for a second.
Okay, well I can email that, of course. And where would blade signs fall into? I was thinking about that a while ago, and I just couldn't understand exactly where it would fall into. The
What was that?
ones with the banners that kind of, they go up and arch.
I don't know.
Which one? The blade sign with a banner with an arch? Can you describe that again?
Yeah, it's like the banners with the arch that you usually use for like maybe openings or special occasions.
Would that be a temporary sign? That would fall underneath a temporary sign?
And as of right now, I think everything else was pretty much addressed, and that's all the questions I had. I can email this.
And I think I have an answer to that now. I was looking through the definitional section, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So I think the issue that you're talking about is whether or not a mural or art display would be a quote-unquote sign. And defining sign in itself was a task. And I think the way I read our current definition, because it wouldn't be intended to bring someone's attention to a product, place, activity, institution, organization, business, I don't know that that would even be classified as a sign, therefore not regulated, is how I would view it currently.
So to kind of get a little bit nitpicky on the wording, the major thing I was trying to ask was advertising murals. So it would have been an artwork that would have been for advertising purposes on the side of the building.
And that would not be allowed. And I mean, you're allowed an attached sign that can be a painted sign, but it has to have certain requirements, size requirements.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. I'll turn now to Commissioner North. Comments or questions? Commissioner North, did we lose you?
I am here.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I'm good right now as far as questions or comments. I think I'll definitely have some as we get into some of the public comment from some of the business owners and stuff. So thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. And then Commissioner Klein.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm coming into this blind. I read through the existing ordinance and then this proposed new draft, and it's quite an improvement. I think it's needed, and everything else I kind of had questions about got answered.
Okay, thank you, sir. I don't know if we ever picked up Commissioner Garza. Did he ever come on? If Commissioner Garza is on, no comments or questions from him. Okay, so we will go to public questions. I think Kayla Brumfield was first up. She had some questions, so we will go with her first.
Thank you so much. And I am here, of course, being a realtor for over 40 years and being the current president of the Clovis Board of Realtors, Clovis Portalis Association of Realtors, also served with the National Association and the State Association. So we had just a couple of concerns on first off, thank you for doing this. I'm all for trying to clean up and make things look a little better. And but on the real estate part, I think you did get some of it straightened out with the for sale by owner. I thought that was not worded very well because it was like on the B part, offered for sale through a real estate agent, and then it kind of jumps into for sale by owner. So that does need to be clarified, definitely. But the one on item C, I believe the way that we read this is a period of 10 days following the date on which a contract of sale has been executed by a person purchasing the property. So are you saying that 10 days after we have an accepted contract, the sign has to come down?
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to that?
Yes, sir.
So I read that as the execution of the contract would be closing, when all parties sign and execute the contract, so it would be 10 days after closing. But just like the way I worded B, I think it could be made clearer so there's no ambiguity and we can put after the date of closing.
Yeah, it doesn't read to any realtor that I've talked to the way that you read it. In our language, when it's the execution of a contract, that's when everybody signed the purchase agreement. And
right.
Many things can happen between then and the actual closing. So that definitely needs to be reworded, please, to say that, because I'd be running back and forth putting signs up all the time because inspections, things fall through, So that needs to be reworded. And then we had an issue with, and maybe it's been answered actually, about putting signs up like on a corner, and we have a house that sits on the corner. Even if it doesn't reach the quarter-acre lot, sometimes we want a sign on the one street and the sign on the other street. Is that an issue?
That is something that we actually were expecting to come up, so I will turn it over to Mr. Morris, Mr. Holt about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just bear with me. I'm reading it as we're going through.
I do think because as defined in number 4, Jared, on page 9, we say one temporary sign may be located on a property when, and then just define the when. And so since we limited it to one, even though it'd be a corner lot, you would still be only allowed one. So,
Yeah, I agree with you.
could we make and once again, just could we make a provision for corner lots when a lot resides on a corner? We may be able to put some language together regarding corner lots.
And then moving that up to 2 is what we're saying, right? On a corner lot.
Yes, because and especially if there's one of the streets that's a very arterial street, our owners want that, and so that's the issue. And by the way, we did send this our state association. We have an attorney, and she's looking this over to make the wording and then we had a question. I met with the directors of our local associations, and we're all in favor of, we appreciate all the work and everything that's gone in on this. But on the open house, what do you mean by 12? You can't have a sign up more than 12 times a year on one property, or is that? Explain that one. I believe that is.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, yeah, so you basically for one property, you can put an open house sign on the property up to 12 days a year. Is the way it reads now. Again, we're open to comment from the public and from you on that. And then I would probably, to follow up with what you said earlier, if we're going to change corner lots to allow a real estate sign on each frontage, then we probably ought to allow an open house sign on each frontage as well. So change both of those.
And so the open house, you can only have it. Oh, that's so once a month for one property. I don't think that was not really an issue for us. We just thought it was because that never happens. But, and I think, let me see if there were any, I think that's really it. I did think you needed to clarify the for sale by owner, but you took care of that. And then make sure that the wording on about the purchase agreement and closing. And I think that's really our main concerns. But I do have a quick question back on what I think Vincent was talking about. On those kind of signs that, blow in the wind, and I guess you call them blade signs. Does this address all of those that are everywhere? And like big, tall, green people that the wind blows, those inflatable things, does this address that type of thing as well?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, it does. So unless it fits one of those exceptions for temporary signs,
Okay.
Which would be real estate sign, open house sign, et cetera, if you're in a central business or industrial district, basically it would be a temporary sign. It would be unlawful unless it fits one of the exceptions.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I think that's all my questions. If you can, and I'll get back to our board and let them.
Mr. Chairman, while we're discussing real estate, one thing that I would like to point out is if I'm driving around and notice real estate signs, and regarding feedback is a lot of times you'll see open house signs in a public right of way along a major arterial roadway pointing to where that open house is located. Well, since that is technically a temporary sign, and since we can't specifically say an open house sign is allowed in the public right of way to do that, then that would be regulated as well. Because once again, since we can't call an open house sign an open house sign, if we allow for that sign to be out of the right of way, then we have to allow for Bob the Builder's handyman sign to also be out in the right of way, because technically they're all temporary signs.
Yeah. So Justin, what you're saying is there would not be a house sign or like a sign with an arrow pointing to another house for sale down the street in the right of way.
Correct.
Okay, I agree with you. I think that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Is that, and so you said that kind of clears up your questions?
It does. If you could reword
Okay.
that, the thing that really bothered both of us was that item C, because we don't, and I understand everybody has different verbiage, but our industry, that very specifically told us as soon as our paperwork was executed, not club. So,
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
We have a couple of people on the call here. Who would like to ask questions next?
Mr. Chairman, would you entertain a question from your local fried cook, John Snowberger?
I would, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. What about our electronic reader boards that we have attached to our road signs? Did I miss something on that?
Pertaining to
Size, content, adding, doing more?
and I know that we're probably looking into that. I didn't see anything on that. I remember reading about electronic signs, Mr. Morris and Mr. Holwell, but anything specific that we need to clear up, Mr. Snowberger?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe there's any extra or additional regulations just because a sign is digital or electronic the way we've adopted it. A lot of the codes do have light requirements and measuring requirements, etc. I think we just treated them the same way that all other freestanding signs or billboards would be treated, and we didn't have any additional restrictions or regulations just because it was illuminated or digital. As far as I remember, I'll have to look through it.
So Jared, I'm trying to relate the two. I'm trying to link the two. Would there be any restrictions on the electronic billboards we have currently?
Just the size, height, and placement restrictions, but there's no you can only have certain lumens or we didn't have any of those restrictions built in.
Size, height, and placement. So without dragging the whole group into it, can you point me to where I can read back on that?
So I drafted those reference tables. Do you have a copy of those?
I do.
Okay, so that'll be probably the easiest place to look. So for example, on the second page, where it talks about freestanding sign regulations. So for Clovis, you actually have to see Table A. So you're allowed, based on your street frontage, you're allowed square footage based on your street frontage. And then Table B is the height requirement. So based on the type of street is the height and the location.
What page on this 20-page document that I have am I looking at, Mr. Moore?
No, it's the 3-page attachment that's titled Sign Code.
I don't have that. Okay.
Okay.
So I can follow up with this. If somebody could email it to me.
It's also in the, just give me a second, it's also on page, so page 11.
Okay. Oh, there it is.
So if it's in arterial road, which I believe all the McDonald's are on, depending on the district, it could be 20 or 35, or the zone rather, 20 or 35 feet high. Then it discusses the setbacks. And then on page 12, depending on your linear street frontage, that determines the size. And your street frontage also determines the number of freestanding signs. If you have more than 600 feet of street frontage, then you can have more than one freestanding sign.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Commissioner Render.
Thank you, sir. I have some questions on temporary signs, as temporary signs relates to politics, and I know that we're not supposed to say that, but let's say that. One of the things that I have is the way I read this thing on a temporary sign in somebody's yard can only be a sign for a candidate that is in that district. Is that what this thing says?
A candidate, or if it involves an issue on the ballot, so a bond or something else.
Okay, but realistically, there are a lot of people who put signs up for candidates that are not in their district, but they are personal friends of that candidate, for one thing. Or another thing is that generally on arterials and places like that, there are good spots where a lot of people are going to drive by. If you're driving down Llano, you may see a sign for somebody not in that district. If you're coming up north, the same thing. If you're going down 21st, you'll see signs for candidates that aren't in those districts, but they're put there because those roads have a lot of traffic and people from all districts drive by those signs. So I have some problems with that. And I understand that you probably researched that closely, and as a Juilliard trained lawyer, I would have some problems with that. And one other thing, on residential places that are zoned residential, there are a lot of zoned residential areas that there are no houses on, and there are very large areas. Again, going down Llano on the south side, west of Thornton, there's a huge open field there, and I believe that's zoned residential. And for all intents and purposes, it's a wonderful place to put a temporary 4x4 or 4x8 sign. And then there's another spot over on Norris that's just south of the 180 church. It's a large open area. And and places like that should almost be considered something other than residential. I mean, they are residentially zoned, but there's no residences there.
I want to think the zoning south 180 on Norris Street, so south of Faith Christian, correct?
Yes. I call it 110.
Yeah. So I think that's actually zoned maybe commercial. And that's why underneath our existing sign ordinance, you can have a larger sign there as well.
Okay. But the area over on Llano, and it runs from Thornton, I think, down through Cheyenne or one of those streets. I mean, it's just a huge open area. Okay. And I think those can support larger signs. And periodically I'll see a sign there that says somebody is advertising that area for sale, and it is bigger than a 6-foot sign. So,
pulling up the zoning map now. Yeah, that's also zoned as commercial as well. So that's why those larger signs.
All right.
Yep.
Then I take it the next time somebody calls me and tells me to get rid of my 4x4s, I can just say that's commercial. Thank you. And I have one other issue on this thing. There's a flashing light on Norris Street by the fire station south of 14th Street. That flashing light, if I'm not paying real close attention, I get nicked. There's a traffic light right in front of that, and if it's possible to just shut off that yellow light, if the fire truck's coming out, then make it flash red or something, which is what I think that light is designed to do, to warn you that there's a fire truck and it's potentially coming out. If you just flash it red whenever that guy's coming out, that may work better than what is there now.
Sure, thank you, Commissioner. I'll definitely look into that with our traffic department. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, and I have one final thing, and I think this is also a typo, similar to what Commissioner North pointed out on page 20 in the enforcement abatement. A fine of up to $500.00 per violation per day, and I'm thinking that should be 50.00. I mean, I can put 3 neat holes in somebody's left breast pocket and not get fined $500 a day.
So, if I could kind of tackle those, I'll go in reverse. So, that mirrors exactly what our UDO and every other city in New Mexico has in their code. And the reason is because $500 is the maximum amount that we're allowed to fine somebody unless it's authorized by state statute. So, for any violation, traffic, UDO, etc., it gives us the ability to fine up to $500. I've never heard of somebody being fined the whole $500 in the year and a half that I've been here, or even close to that. If it goes to court, the judge will typically suspend the entire fine, and you'll end up paying court costs. But the judge would allow us to exercise our full authority of up to $500, depending on the nature of the violation and the person's history. So the reason that number is in there is because and the same reason it's in every single code in every city is because that's the extent of our jurisdiction to fine someone. So we could change that and hamstring ourselves if we wanted to. There wouldn't be any legal reason why we couldn't reduce the number. We just can't increase it. And to answer your question about the district, I'll do a little bit of looking into it, but I don't see any reason why we can't remove that. I mean, it may create a slippery slope that we now have campaign signs for people in Texas or Colorado or whatever. And if we're willing to accept that risk, then so be it. But I don't see any legal reason why we can't remove the district requirement. And I think your points about especially advertising your 4x8, 32 square foot signs in commercial areas, and there aren't as many of them, makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that you'll get rid of the plethora of Kansas signs and Texas signs that are cluttering up the streets as I drive down through Clovis. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, I stand corrected. I'm sorry. West of Thornton is zoned residential single family except for right around Lore Street, which is zoned commercial. So that area actually is zoned residential single family.
And I think on that rewording too, that we can work on making sure that the races are national or in the state, and find a way to word that where we keep it like we need to. Okay, so Commissioner Render, did we get your questions answered?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I know that we have a couple other people on the line who would like to go next.
Hey, this is Sid Strigback. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Of course, everybody knows I'm a big free enterprise advocate, and less government generally is better, and we need to be real careful of what we do in terms of restrictions. Especially, I'm looking at the 20-foot height that we have on commercial signs, and yet we look at Roswell and Hobbs, and the cities that we're along, and they've all got 35 foot, and currently we've got a lot of 40-foot signs. I just really struggle with telling a business owner that you can't use your property as you see fit. And then when you look at the size of the signs, man, that gets pretty restrictive, especially when it's based on front footage. And when you look at some businesses, they don't have as much front footage, but they've got the total square footages of business. And the way that's kind of, I just think, 75 square feet is not very big. And that's what you'd be limited to if you, let's see, look at that right. I had it right there. I believe if you have less than 300 front feet, you'd be limited to 75 square feet. And that's not, what as we all know, what looks like a 4x8 sign looks pretty big if you've got it on the ground, but you put it up in the air, and it, and according to kind of the research that Brandon had done, 90% of the signs in Clovis are over 20 foot tall, and that kind of puts us at a little overly restrictive. And I'm not sure. I agree you need some regulation on what we do, but just simple little things like to make our kebabs look like all the other kebabs in the system, we have a banner sign that goes around and says steaks, seafoods, and burgers. I don't know what it says, but we wouldn't match the other cities that are in Texas and other places in New Mexico. And I think we need to be real careful about that. And if it's gaudy looking, and I know that's hard to regulate, that's one thing. But if it's the standard motif that you're looking at, and you look at Gary Hamilton's Ford store, it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look like he's got a proliferation of signs, but he'd be in violation, and yet he matches Ford dealerships other places, unless you go to some place like Santa Fe, which you expect to see more restrictions. And we're not in Santa Fe. We're competing more with, the West Texas kind of environment or people. And so I would just encourage a little bit of study of existing signs and also input of what people think looks bad. If you see a sign that looks bad and you think, man, I hate, every time I bring in a visitor from out of town, I go, oh man, what's that? Then maybe we need to look at how we regulate that. But when you're out on the highway, any town, you expect to see some stuff. And if you're a little further out, some of those places where people are going 55 miles an hour, you have a little bitty sign they can't even read. So I would just encourage a little more maybe work session out in the field, and maybe get Brandon New and let him go around and kind of show you, because you can't tell from the ground. what size these signs are. And Snowbirder signs don't look bad to me, but they're all in violation of this new ordinance. And I don't think our McDonald's signs look bad. They're tastefully done. And I just think we need a little more work on what the actual numbers say. And let's don't make people think we're just trying to, and we sure don't want to make it look like, well, we're letting existing businesses, and I agree, I think Jared addressed it earlier, that we need to grandfather in. You can't ask somebody, if we change our insulation code, we don't make every homeowner go remodel their house, because that's pretty onerous, but I think you've already addressed that. But we also don't want to make it look like a new business coming in town, like Dion's Pizza. We're going to make you put up a little bitty sign, but hey, the rest of us get to leave up our big signs because we're the locals. And so anyway, that's just my thought. I cringe at you talked about can't raise the fine. It's regulations can be used in a very onerous kind of deal, and the political deal and the 4th of July stuff. Hey, we're used to political signs, and it doesn't matter which candidate. I think everybody it's the political season. And Tom was talking about the farmers electric sign. That's not what we're having sign regulations for, is to keep them from doing something patriotic. And so I just think we need a little more study on it. I applaud, the study and the time that's going into it. But that's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And from a staff perspective, and that's where we go back to our original comments, trying to regulate what balance the two between free enterprise and allowing companies to advertise, as well as trying to put a code in place in which our staff can regulate. Because when we start talking about what looks good to me and what looks good to somebody else can be entirely two different things. And so trying to find that balance to where, from a regulatory standpoint, when code enforcement officers are reviewing and looking at these situations, it's got to be black and white for us, unfortunately. And so we can't say, yeah, that looks nice, so we'll keep that. And so that's where we're trying to find that balance. And to Mr. Strebeck's point, I mean, regarding sizes, that's why we try to increase the sizes when you get into more industrial zones, when you get along different types of streets, from residential to collectors to arterials, increasing it. And like I said, this was a starting point for us in trying to get that feedback from everybody. But to the point, I mean, signs are larger in the air than what you may actually think. Because it's true when we're doing road signage for roadway projects. I mean, the higher the speed limit, the larger your signs are naturally going to be, so that you can read them. And I mean, to the point, I mean, I always like to point out the striping on roads. That dash stripe on a road is actually 10 feet long. And so it doesn't feel like it's 10 feet long, but it is actually 10 feet long. And there's a 30-foot gap in between those. And so just for a point of reference there. But once again, this was a starting point for us to look at that and start the conversation. But to reemphasize, I need, from an enforcement standpoint, we've got to have a number. I can't ask my code enforcement officers to regulate based off of looks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I can piggyback on that, I have no personal input on the numbers that were chosen. The numbers that I used in our tables, to the best of my ability, were right in the middle of where everybody else, not Santa Fe, not Albuquerque, but cities like Clovis were. And I think that's what I tried to illustrate on the tables. And I'm not saying they're good or they're bad for Clovis. All I was doing is trying to put something together that's right in the middle as a starting point to initiate comment and discussion. So that's what I did the best that I could.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is Gary Hamilton. May I speak, please?
Yes, sir.
I very seldom get involved with the city commission and city issues. I try to stay as neutral as possible, but I've got to add some comment to this. I employ about 150 people. We've got businesses in Clovis right now that are hanging on by a thread. We are doing everything we can to create business, to pay employees. Like I say, I employ 150 people. In the past, we've done as much as $100 million in sales. Signs are the backboard of our business. We contribute immensely to the tax base in New Mexico and in Clovis. And as you hinder our ability to promote our product because of sign restrictions, you're going to kill this. You're going to stop it. And honestly, I respect the work that's gone into this, but we need to drive around Clovis, and there's block after block of abandoned houses, junk, trash, buildings half fallen down that we ignore every day to look at a sign and critique that. It doesn't make any sense. And now's not the time. We need to promote commerce right now. Commerce is one of the most important things we have. We've got restaurants in this town that are hanging on by a thread, and other businesses are barely making it. And I don't mean this disrespectful, but most of you that are doing a lot of this research and focusing on the signs now are all getting a paycheck. We're out trying to make a living right now, and now's not the time to beat up signs in Clovis. And that's how I honestly feel. I think our city commissioners need to really look twice before we vote on real restrictive sign sizes and signs per lot, and that there's so many other issues that are so much more important right now. This town needs a lot of attention in a lot of other areas before we look at signs. That's my opinion.
And thank you for that. Going into this, I understand what you're saying of, 2020 is not the year to, nitpick at things that could hurt anything that our city or the people that are in it that are trying to do. This is just a time where this is where it kind of popped up, and this is what we're looking at in our little corner of our work in the city that we're doing. I understand. I hear your concerns. I hear what you're saying. I also hear that, we go to different cities and we travel whenever we were allowed to do that. And we've gone to different towns and we see billboards and we see all kinds of signs that are up and they're competing with each other. And whenever you start to have these conversations, you want to make sure that whenever they come to Clovis, they're not hit with sign after sign after sign after sign after sign, and they don't like any of them, and they can't read them, and they skip town and go somewhere else because they're confused by everything that's going on. I hear what everybody is saying about the way that the signs look and the sizes they need to be and how competition and open market and those things work, but like Mr. Howald said, there needs to be a number. There needs to be something on paper where we can make sure that we are weeding out those signs that are not up to code or unsafe, or that they look not good, that it's tastefully bad for our city. We're really not trying to, damage anybody's business or what we're trying to do to help build our city, but at this time, with the UDO and code, we're trying to get this is the input that we need. So I respect the things that you've said. I respect the things that Mr. Strebeck said. And we will take those into considerations. We're not 100% married to all of this that's on the paper. And we don't want to make it where we're killing business with Clovis, because that is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do. There's a difference between putting everything up that we can to draw attention to ourselves and putting things up that are nice and tasteful and make us look good. And that's the goal of this, is we want to make it look good. We want to have the attention that you need, but we also want to have the image that we feel as a city that needs to be out there. So I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and all of these comments will be taken into consideration as we go back and before we make final approval on this, especially in planning and zoning. So I
ask you one other question.
Yes, sir.
So ultimately, does the city commission vote on this proposal?
Yes, and just for clarification.
So it's up to them ultimately.
Yes, sir. And so obviously, we heard in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and what they will do then is ultimately make a recommendation to the City Commission, and then since it is per ordinance, it would have to be introduced first at a City Commission meeting, and then later, then adopted following the 30-day noticing period for final adoption as an ordinance. And just as a reminder, I do understand that the timing, it is difficult. I understand, and it's hard. And the city of Clovis is trying to support our local businesses as best as we possibly can. And just to remind, this is a process that we started on over a year ago before COVID was a thing. And so with the Supreme Court ruling, part of what staff is trying to do and administration is trying to do is keep the city from getting sued. I mean, because currently our sign code that is in place is not in compliance with the Supreme Court ruling. And I certainly don't want to subject the city to that and that potential for a lawsuit. And so that's why, I mean, we've carried on with this process, trying to bring us into compliance with the laws that are out there.
You know, and I respect compliance. I really do. And I respect the fact that there needs to be taste and there needs to be aesthetic, a decent look to it. But like Sid said, you know, I'm probably in the top 5 advertisers in Clovis in the way of signs. I think Brandon New would back that up. And there are a lot of distasteful looking signs, and I get it. But by the same token, the limitations and the sizes, I think we really need to revisit it, because honestly, a 4x8 sheet, 20 foot up in the air, going by at 30 miles an hour, you can't see. You might as well not have one. So I'm going to ask the city commissioners to put this on the table for a while and get past the COVID thing. That's going to be my request. And the second thing is, I think we need to revisit the signs versus the property sizes and that. As far as what's on them and how they look and how many and how close they are, I respect all of that. But by the same token, I think we need to revisit. There's a lot of things in Clovis that need to be looked at, and I think that signs is way down the priority list, in my opinion, right now. And that's all I've got to say, and thank you for my time.
Absolutely. And so, Mr. Chairman, just for everybody's information, the city did host a town hall meeting last night regarding metropolitan redevelopment areas, in which we are trying to address some of the blight that you may see in the southern part of our community. So while this is in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we certainly are trying to address lots of other subjects at the same time, as well as working with Mr. Morris to review all of our codes when it comes to public nuisances, weeds and debris, etc. So that is something that we also do recognize and are working towards that, parallel to working on other things.
Okay. Anybody else from the public for comment or questions?
I had
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, it looks like Mayor Morris has his hands raised.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Mayor Morris.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you to this group. You know, as I sit here and I listen to this, I think how, you know, it's necessary that we modernize our sign code, just like it's necessary that we do a lot of other things around the city in order to clean up. And, you know, Mr. Howalt referenced the MRA effort and cleaning up. And, you know, it's important. I think we all agree, you know, when the people that supported me for mayor, almost, you know, 9 out of 10 times would talk about, you know, they want to see a more clean and orderly, aesthetically pleasing city. And we all agree that that's important, in addition to needing to modernize the code for legal reasons. And so, you know, I applaud the work that's going on to do this, but I would ask that that everyone understand that today's meeting was about getting feedback from business owners. And I would ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to take into account what has been said. And I already know that you will, but let's look at those square footage limitations. Let's make sure that that while we're updating the code and making sure that our city is going to be clean and orderly and aesthetically pleasing, that we're not putting any undue burden or additional difficulty on businesses. And while this is a process that started long before COVID, the fact is we are dealing with COVID and its restrictions at this point. So, I don't think that I don't think we're up against a real tight deadline and that we need to rush on this. So I would encourage the commission to let's look at that. If those square footages are kind of in the middle of where they could be, let's look at, can we move them up or what can we do to make sure that we're not putting undue burden on businesses. And that's, I guess, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Strubeck, I just wanted you to hear me say that the city commission and I do not want to do anything that's gonna hurt you or it's gonna hurt any business. And so while I'm happy about the work that the Planning and Zoning Commission is doing, and I think it's necessary, I'm going to ask that we do take it slow and let's make sure we take a look at those square footages. And yes, let's get something that we can all be proud of, and that's not going to put undue burden on businesses. But again, thank you to the commission. Thank you to Mr. Morris, Mr. Howalt, for the work that you're doing on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Morris. Caleb, do you have a follow-up question?
Sid Strebeck, I just wanted to follow up and say didn't want anybody to misunderstand what any of us said. I think we're all in agreement that we need to avoid anything we need to have a regulation where we don't get sued for content deal. If that's a law, that's a law. But I might add, and I think Gaylor would agree, what we've typically done with our laws, for instance, zoning, we don't decide what a particular community is going to look like. We live that up to that community in restrictive covenants. And I think Gaylor would agree that the tighter the restrictive covenants, most generally, the better the resale value, because that's what drives people. And the free enterprise system has a way, and if we were going to put in a new commercial development right now, we would probably, in fact, have sign ordinances, which would be just fine, because we want it to look like a clean, neat development that people want to be part of. And so the more we can let the private sector do stuff, the better. So, but we do applaud your work. So thank you.
And Gayla, did you have anything to add off of that?
No, again, I just wanted to thank you guys, and if you need any input from the Realtor Association or anything, please just let us know, and we'll be involved with it, in any way that we can. So I do have just one little comment. Would is it like in a residential area, how many flags can you have on a residential lot, like American flags or whatever?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm using my phone even though I'm still on the screen because I had an issue with my audio. You can have 2 flag poles up to 4 flags.
Okay. All right, now I'm going to say something kind of just funny. I think it's funny, but can you put them in trees?
I would have to reread it. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it has to be attached to the pole. It can't be hanging off a tree over Prince Street.
Okay. I'm just curious. Thank you.
And if I could just, again, I thought we made this really clear until Mr. Hamilton spoke. We came up with a legally efficient sign code. We did not come up with numbers because we're experts in deciding for the city what size signs should be. I thought it was a good idea to just, as a starting point, put us in the middle of where everybody else is and then allow public comment. We're not proposing these numbers. I don't just collect a check. I actually have a business where I paid a lot of money for a painted sign that may or may not conform with our new sign code that goes on 2 sides of our warehouse on Main Street because we don't have visibility from 6084. So I understand the importance of it. I didn't come up with the numbers because I have some expertise and know what's a fair size and height, what's good, what's not, what's structurally safe. I have no idea. I just wanted to put something together that I felt like was in the middle so everybody else could comment on it and take something good for Clovis to the commission ultimately.
And like I said in my comment as well, this is not something that we're 100% married to. It is people that aren't in the business that, go and look at what we need to be doing and put together something that hopefully we can all come to the table on and agree on. This is a perfect place, example of how we want this process to work. This is the first step to, the ultimate plan of what's going to roll out. And I think you're right. I think that we are all on the same page of we want what's best for Clovis. I don't want people to drive into town and not like what they see and turn around and go the other way. That's the last thing that I want. But and that's why we're all here, is to come together and make sure that we're all on the same page, and we want Clovis to look like we want it to look, and we take control of that. Commissioner North, did you have something? I saw that you became unmuted.
Just real quick, thank you, Chairman. I think I just want to echo kind of both sides here, not to be too much of a diplomat, but really, Brandon, are you still on the line? I'm assuming he is. I think that's the expert that we should, definitely lean on, and he's already volunteered for that, and he said he would definitely help us. And Mr. Hamilton, to go back to what you were saying, for sure, we don't want to hurt businesses. That's not what we're about. That's not what the city of Clovis is about. It's definitely not what the P&Z is about, and we want to do what's best for both sides. But again, to echo Mr. Hamilton, for sure, we definitely want to encourage business. And Mr. Strebeck, absolutely, free enterprise is what drives everything. So I think that's the goal of the commission here, and then to take that to the city commission. So Brandon, I'm definitely going to lean on you, and I think the commission's going to lean on you to get that expertise, because I would say there's probably no bigger expert in the city of Clovis. And I know that Jared would agree with me on that. So I think that's what we'll do, and we'll definitely put the pressure on the business owners to help us out on this, because we want the best for the city. So that's just all I had to say, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to reiterate, I wasn't being disrespectful to anybody about paychecks. That wasn't my intent. I was trying to use it as a comparison. When you're running a business, and I know, Mr. Morris, being an attorney, you're definitely a business, and you've got an overhead. But in general, I was talking the ebb and flow of business has a lot to do with how we promote our business and how we advertise our business, and of course, signage is a major part of a lot of businesses, not all businesses, and I don't know that attorneys necessarily use signage as much, but they have to promote their business in other ways. And so where I was coming from is I respect all the work you've done, and I didn't realize that we were potentially could be in a lawsuit with the Supreme Court rulings, and so I've been educated to that, and I respect that, and I think we need to respect it. But to the same token, where I was coming from is there's a lot of things in Clovis. You're concerned about people driving into Clovis and turning and going the other way. There's a lot of things besides signage that we need to address, and I'm all for it. I'm even willing to contribute. I understand it. Clovis is where I make my living. This is where my family makes their living. My grandkids are here. My kids are here. I want the best for Clovis. I don't want to do anything to harm us, and I don't want to disrespect anybody that's working to help make it better. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm not being disrespectful to anybody. I want the best for this town. This is where I make my living too.
Yes, sir. And I didn't think that way. We understood where you were coming from, for sure.
Thank you. I'll get off of it now. So. Thank you.
All right, we're going on an hour and a half for this. Do we have anybody else from the public that would like to make comment or have questions? Okay, hearing none. I think that a little direction on how we're going to move forward with taking comments in and how we're going to work through those. Mr. Holwalt, can we kind of discuss that and let everybody know before we adjourn this meeting?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I think it was a great conversation today. As it's been mentioned several times, this was a kicking off point for us. And so we're definitely going to take everybody's feedback that we've received today. We'll go back out and take a look and do some research on if there is a way to regulate based on speed limits, or is there a way to regulate looking at the size of the signs, et cetera. And so it's something that we're happy to do. So we can certainly take it. But I think this is a good backbone and a good start to have those conversations. So go back out, do some more research, and develop and continue to work on this draft. But I don't think this is something that at this time that we're ready to take to the Planning and Zoning Commission, say at their next meeting. And so what I would propose doing is let us do that. Let us continue to whittle on this, and we'll certainly push it back out again. And we can have another study session regarding this matter.
Okay, great. Thank you, Frank. Is there anything that you had that you'd like to follow up?
I was just going to add, if what would be helpful, I think, to us is for Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Strebeck, for Brandon, for anyone else that has a proposal about what they think is a good height, size, or number requirement, to put it in writing and either send it to me or send it to city administration, because I learned a number of things today, especially from Ms. Brumfield, about how it needs to be worded for the real estate section that I wouldn't have known had anyone not brought it up. So what would be really constructive and helpful would be, give us some numbers about what you think the sign code should look like and maybe why, and we can use that. And one point, too, I wanted to make is I think it would be, it's in our best interest to encourage businesses and franchises to open up here. And if K-Bob's, if every K-Bob's has a banner on the side of their K-Bob's, then I think, that's not something I've ever thought of before, is maybe we need to allow for banners and attached signs and freestanding signs. That's, it never even crossed my mind before today. So getting us something in writing before the next study session from whoever's listening and interested and has an opinion, I think would be most constructive.
I will get that information to you, and I will work with Brandon on that as well.
And Mr. Strebeck as well, we would like to hear some of the things that you brought up as well.
Yeah, we'll get with Brandon, so thank you.
All right, hearing no further comment, we will, you know where to get information to people, and you can call City Hall and we can get that done. We can get the information to you. Hearing no further comment, we will adjourn.